Hey folks, BlackCross here, and welcome back to another video game discussion. We're going to be talking about Final Fantasy, or more specifically, the 35th anniversary of Final Fantasy. Thing is, it kind of sneaked up on me. Yeah. When is that a surprise? It felt like literally last year I was celebrating the 30th anniversary of Final Fantasy, what with me doing all of the Let's Plays and Twitch streams of me playing through the Final Fantasy franchise and stuff. And that was a unique experience for me, in my personal opinion. Just being able to play through all of the different Final Fantasy games and be able to see the evolution that the series has gone through since the original release. It's a pretty interesting thing to do. I highly recommend it to anyone who are quote-unquote fans of Final Fantasy, because you don't truly understand the level that Final Fantasy is until you try playing through at least all of the mainline Final Fantasy games. I don't think you have to play the MMOs, because a lot of people would agree that they are different compared to the main single player games themselves, so it depends on your overall thought process. But with that being said though, it's just weird that we're already at the 35th anniversary. And so I'm sure some of you guys are going to be asking me, what have I got lined up? Nothing, I'm afraid. To be perfectly honest, there is kind of a video idea that I've wanted to do, and that was kind of talk about my overall thoughts on Final Fantasy 15, or rather in terms of the overall progression and development of 15's release and stuff like that. Because I feel like me and 15 have quite the interesting history. I mean, yes, Final Fantasy 15 has a history all on its own. But for me in Final Fantasy 15, I felt different throughout the entire time in terms of development, in terms of playing the game, and in terms of how it was handled. There was quite a lot of stuff that was handled through that game. A lot more than I personally cared to admit, of course, mind you. But with that said, that's kind of a thing that I would like to eventually put together. But that's still kind of on the realms of like growing and simmering and eventually sitting down and actually putting together the video itself. But really, in all honesty, there's nothing really anything that I can do in terms of content making aside from like obviously playing the games themselves. Which, speaking of, there's a lot that's going on just this year alone that is in regards to the Final Fantasy franchise itself. A lot mostly Final Fantasy VII related, but that's beside the point. So let's just kind of go through the list of Final Fantasy games that either have been or are continuing to be released or being talked about right now. For starters, Strangers of Paradise Final Fantasy, or Final Fantasy Origins Strangers of Paradise, however it was named, I forgot all of a sudden. Anyway though, so the biggest thing about that game was that I felt a little bit mixed. It felt too much like how Neo is, instead of being like an actual Final Fantasy game. I mean, keep in mind, it is co-developed by the same people who have done Neo, but it's like, it's too much Neo. I want it to be like its own Final Fantasy-esque formula, and it wasn't that. It unfortunately kind of fell short for me, especially in terms of like the missions, and then not only that, by the time you beat the game, you then have the overall different difficulties that you can play as and stuff like that. And I'm just like, yeah, I don't remotely care about this game enough to where I want to do all of that perfectly, if I have to be perfectly honest with myself. Which is unfortunate, because the game is okay for what it is. It's okay for what it needs to be. The story, however, though, is a little bit mixed for me. I won't lie on that one. The story I felt was a little too out there. Like, really out there. I knew Jack was going to be Garland. I knew he was going to be eventually the bad guy. But the way it was all carried out just kind of lost me, I'm afraid. It really put a sour taste in my mouth. One that I'm afraid kind of impacted my overall thoughts and opinions on the game itself. So I will admit that is personally my fault. But overall, in terms of the gameplay experience, I personally was okay with it. It's not bad. My personal favorite was actually the job systems. Being able to have the different jobs that Jack can change into and stuff like that. That was really cool. It's kind of weird, especially, again, like I said, it felt like a true and blue Neo clone. It's not like it's trying to hide the fact that it's a Neo clone, it's literally a Neo clone. But then something came up that made me go, I might come back to this later. So, there's been DLC releases for the game recently. The first one was, of course, involving Bahamut. As to how that involves, I do not know. I imagine there's like a summon job system in which where you become the summons themselves, which that would be interesting. But then, that didn't really interest me still, so I didn't really care much on that area. However, though, there was another thing that did interest me, and that was the appearance of Gilgamesh. This was released back in October, and so to see Gilgamesh, I was like, wow, oh boy, I might come back to this eventually. For those that don't know, ever since, like, I want to say around Final Fantasy 12 and 13-ish, I had become an instant fan of a character by the name of Gilgamesh. In a way, because of how the Final Fantasy franchise has continued and all this stuff, Gilgamesh has been kind of like the Deadpool of the franchise, you know? Because of how his story kind of unfolds in Final Fantasy V, he is basically a dimension hopper. He can jump into different worlds of the Final Fantasy at any point in time, with the exception of course, Final Fantasy 15, where he's a completely different person entirely. But, with that being said though, the majority of the Final Fantasy series has depicted him in the same way of some form or manner. Dressed in a red, kind of like thief-looking outfit, has the ability to wield multitudes of different weapons at any given form, and for the most part, especially the main Gilgamesh himself, he has the ability to stretch out 6 arms and use 6 different weapons in total. So, an interesting character, and one that I absolutely love. Whenever I just see him, I'm so energetic because I always want to see what type of mishap he's going to be involved in some form or way, because it's usually going to be so weird and unusual and goofy, and I love it. And so whenever I saw Gilgamesh in the trailer for the new DLC that was coming out then, I was like, so I'm going to have to get the game again in order to play this part, ain't I? I don't normally do stuff like that, but because of how uninterested I was in wanting to go back to Strangers of Paradise, I just kind of gave up on the game and sold it and stuff like that. And now with that particular DLC, I'm just like, okay, I might come back to this later. I don't know. I don't think I'll come back to it this year. Maybe whenever the, I suppose if they ever release all the DLC that they want to release for it, they make like a suplex version of it, you know, in terms of whatever form they create and stuff like that, and it's actually extremely discounted and stuff like that. Like, I want to say the base game is worth $15 at the very least, and then added on all the DLC on top of it to give it a little bit extra boost possibly. But again, with that being said, I'm not really enthused about wanting to go back to it, except for the Gilgamesh mission. That is completely me on that one. So yeah, we'll see how that unfolds later on, of course. The next one actually on the lineup is actually that of Final Fantasy VII Reunion Crisis Core, or Crisis Core Final Fantasy VII Reunion. However way that title is, I get that mixed up so badly. For those that don't know, this is technically a remaster / remake of Crisis Core, and the way I look at it as a remake because it's using the remake engine from Final Fantasy VII itself. So it's literally the base game of Crisis Core that was originally released for the PSP, but it has a new engine developed and built and recreated Final Fantasy Crisis Core for modern day console. To be perfectly honest, they didn't have to do that. They could have easily just ported it onto consoles and most of us would have been fine with that. But the fact that it became a remake and everything like that is a unique, different experience. Especially to a point of having different voice actors, with that being said. Overall though, I do plan on getting Crisis Core whenever I get a chance. It's already out technically right now as of the release of this video. And I'm looking forward to playing it, because I was always decided about having Crisis Core for consoles. In fact, what's funny, I have an emulated machine put together to where I can finally play PSP games onto the system. And I tried out Crisis Core, and I was like, this feels so good to play it onto the system. This is so cool. Being able to play as Zack again, and having it on a bigger screen and everything like that. I don't have to do this the entire time and stuff like that. I love it. I'm not a handheld person these days, so I'm very happy that I can make that experience work on the television. And then shortly afterwards, Final Fantasy VII Crisis Core Reunion. And I'm like, shit. I was like, okay, well, there goes that plan. But hey, I'm happy regardless, so that makes me happy. But that's basically in terms of regular release that's already released now and stuff. Now we have upcoming releases that are happening in terms of Final Fantasy. We have Final Fantasy Pixel Remaster finally getting console releases. They kind of silently revealed this recently, this past December, where literally they basically said, well, a lot of people were actually finding it in the ESR system, whatever it's technically called, basically saying that there was a listings for Final Fantasy Pixel Remaster for Switch and PS4. And I'm like, that's going to be a flat-out rumor and a lie if I ever heard one. But then, slowly but surely, Square Enix was like, yeah, it's a thing. And I'm like, what? It's so weird. It's almost as though as if Square is ashamed of revealing that it's going to be released on console. Especially since everyone wanted a console version of this. Everyone wanted a console version release of the Pixel Remaster, being able to play through Final Fantasy 1 through 6 on consoles. This was something people have asked whenever they first revealed it. And they still held back on releasing it. What the frick is wrong with you, Square Enix? But in all honesty, I can't complain anymore, because finally it is going to get a console release. Unfortunately, the physical version is showing that it's going to be a limited release, I'm afraid. And as of right now, whenever it was first announced that they were going to reveal pre-orders and stuff like that, I went to look at it, and already it was on the waiting list. And then about a day or two later, it got shut down and saying no more orders can be made. Yeah. Now, with that being said, it could be the fact that they wasn't expecting this amount of orders being placed for it, and eventually we will see more physical versions of this being released out in public, perhaps. Who knows? I would feel bad knowing that Square doesn't care about its audiences enough to know that they just flat out didn't want to release it on consoles. It's almost as if they didn't want it to have been the case at all. I don't know why, because you would think Final Fantasy 1 through 6, who doesn't want to play them? There's a lot of people who wants to play them, especially Final Fantasy 6, of course, mind you. But that being said, I'm just kind of surprised that Square didn't want to release this on console. It feels like it to me. It feels like they didn't want to do it. They didn't want to fold over and say, here's your console version. They wanted to have it exclusively onto Steam, much less on mobile phone, which makes no sense to me whatsoever why you was restricted to begin with. It makes zero sense at all. With that being said, hopefully it will get restocked. Hopefully by the time it gets to be released, which if I'm not mistaken, it's going to be released in March, if I read it right. March of this year. So, in other words, hopefully by the time it got close to March, pre-orders will be back on, and I should be able to get my physical order of Final Fantasy Pixel Remaster, hopefully. Because I would definitely love to replay them again. Then, of course, in June, we're getting Final Fantasy 16. And I've held myself back long enough. I've held myself back on it. I am excited for Final Fantasy 16. I am very excited. It's going to be weird at first to know that it's going to feel completely different than what it has been feeling for the past known couple of entries. But to get a completely different Final Fantasy experience and one on action RPG aesthetics, I'm looking forward to it personally. I really am. As much of a fan of the JRPG genre that I am, I'm not going to deny whenever I say the phrase that if I had to pick between turn-based and action-based, I would be more action-based, but I am easily accustomed to turn-based, so it's not going to hurt me either way, so long as the game is fun and unique and the strategies are well done regardless. Like, so long as it's good, I don't think I can complain either way. But it's interesting that we're getting a mainline Final Fantasy game that is a true and blue action game. I mean, Record 15 was more action oriented, but I kind of held myself back for a while because after 15 and Kingdom Hearts 3, I've had to hold myself back on expectations because here's the thing, because of how long we've waited for 15 and 3, part of me knew it wasn't going to match up to what I wanted, but I didn't prepare myself that I should have been. I should have been a little bit more prepared. And then when Final Fantasy 16 got revealed, I was excited to know what it was going to look like and stuff, but then I was also holding myself back because I didn't want to feel that same hurt that I felt for the other games, you know? I still love Kingdom Hearts 3, I still love Final Fantasy 15. It just isn't as highly anticipated as I wanted it to be, you know? They did their job, they did what they needed to do, and they were still good at the end of the day. Kingdom Hearts 3 is still considered to be my second favorite in the Kingdom Hearts entry. And then Final Fantasy 15 is not my absolute favorite, admittedly, but it's like within the top 5, top 10-ish Final Fantasy games that I enjoy. So it's one of those things where it's like, I don't hate them, they just didn't measure up to the epic level that they were building up to at this point. Which, to be fair, considering when they were originally talked about, yeah, kind of makes sense. Unlike those games, Final Fantasy 16 didn't have nearly a long development time, which probably helps in that area. There's also the fact that technically the director that's done Final Fantasy 14 is in charge of 16, which is looking good, to be perfectly honest. It's definitely something that I was surprised to see. We then have the combat director from not Final Fantasy, oh gosh, I'm really messed that up. We have the combat director of Devil May Cry 5 also being a part of Final Fantasy 16. So I have no doubt in my mind that the gameplay is going to be great. Like I said before, Devil May Cry 5 was a really, really fun game, and I was so glad that the combat evolved the way that it did. So it's going to be interesting to see how the combat's going to feel in Final Fantasy 16. I'm just very excited. Again, it is going to be a different Final Fantasy, I feel like, and it's going to be something that I think a lot of us are going to make accommodations to and trying to adjust, because Square's not wrong on this ideal. Square is not wrong. Its audiences is no longer us. The audience is now the younger generation. And for the majority of the younger generations, they don't like turn-based combat. There's a lot of people of the younger generation that will tell you that they themselves don't understand why it's turn-based. To them, it just makes no sense whatsoever, and for them, it's very boring, which is understandable. For me, I can akin to both turn-based and action-based, especially since Square hasn't really done a good job of delivering a true action-based combat compared to that of Kingdom Hearts quality. And even the director himself for 16, I keep forgetting his name, so you'll have to pardon me whenever I don't know it right offhand, but he also said it himself that Square is not well known for its action combat. It's only well known in terms of Kingdom Hearts, and he wants to finally break that mold through the Final Fantasy franchise, deliver a true action game within Final Fantasy 16. Now, I know a lot of people are going to feel a little bit different about it, but here's what he's meaning. A true blue feel for action. You know, action being that of your actions are literally your commands. You know, you actually get to input the action themselves, whether they be actually attacking, whether it's spell casting, whether it's jumping, dodging. Yes, in Final Fantasy VII Remake, you can do that, but technically you don't jump yourself. You yourselves do not jump. If nothing else, if there's a flying enemy and you do attack, it will auto jump for you to attack the enemy and stuff. Which, to be fair, makes sense in terms of programming. But the entire time, that first time that happened, I was trying to figure out how do you jump on your own to attack the enemy. And to me, it felt weird that it jumped for me. So it's like, it wasn't a true action game like I thought it was going to be. Like, I thought it was going to be an action game in which where I myself took full control of Cloud and the others. But in that small area alone, I technically do not have full control. Which kind of sucks, sadly. It kind of sucks. But hopefully this will be a different case. Hopefully 16 will show that, hey, this is finally the true Final Fantasy that we have been looking forward to. I'm hoping that's the case, but at the same time, I'm also holding myself back to where I can still enjoy it for what it basically is. And that basically leaves the very end of the year, potentially, possibly even next year, technically, depending on how you look at it, Final Fantasy VII Part 2. Which is, what was it again? I forgot all of a sudden. Hang on a moment. Rebirth. That's what it is. I completely forgot. I knew that we've already done Reunion with Crisis Core. I forgot what this one was. And then it's like, okay, what was it again? It's Re-something. I know that much. But it's Rebirth. So Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. Should have been Remake Part 2, but I'll take whatever it is. With that being said, though, it says winter of 2023. But that could subjectively change to where it could be the beginning of 2024. Like, it could, because winter ranges from December to March of the following next year. So in other words, if it doesn't get a release for December, it will most likely get a release between January, February, and March. So I would not doubt in my mind that it does get, like, potentially pushed back for 2024, even though it was slated for 2023. And I know some people will be like, oh, well, what if it could be the fact it could get released in February of this year? And I'm like, nah, not possible. No, they would have done a reveal trailer of some kind to reveal that, yes, that is the case. So I don't think that that's going to be the case at all, sadly. I know a lot of people would want it to be more so, but no, it's going to be literally December of this year, and more likely it's going to be the following next year instead. So I have no doubt in my mind that that's probably going to be the case. But it's still going to be interesting nonetheless. We are technically currently in the 25th anniversary of Final Fantasy VII, I believe, which is mind-blowing to know that we are on a 25th anniversary, which is also consists of the 35th anniversary of Final Fantasy. I, for one, am looking forward to this year as to how Final Fantasy we're getting and stuff like that. It's not going to be as magnanimous as, like, the 30th anniversary was, but it's still exciting regardless. It's exciting to see that what we're going to see in the future is definitely going to finally be something brighter, we're hoping, you know? And hopefully, I'm still looking forward to 16. It's just going to feel weird for, like, the first part of it, obviously. And then, of course, there's also Final Fantasy VII Remake series, which is that of Reunion and Rebirth that we're getting eventually. And again, I'm hoping to eventually get the Pixel Remaster, and hopefully I do. I swear, I sound like a frickin' Oliver. It's like, please, sir, I want the Pixel Remaster for physical. Oh gosh, I'm an idiot. I probably should also consider buying more Final Fantasy related stuff, especially t-shirt lines. Aside from the Final Fantasy VII First Class Soldier Cloud shirt, I don't have any other Final Fantasy shirts except for this right here. One of my friends, Doug, got me this for Christmas, so shout out to you, Doug. I love this. It's really cool. I love it. So I just decided to wear it for this video because of the fact that it is the 35th anniversary of Final Fantasy. And again, I'm looking forward to how this year is going to be in terms of Final Fantasy, even though I'm mostly going to be involved with Kingdom Hearts still, especially considering the fact that the 20th anniversary will be up by the time it gets to be March. But with that being said, anyway guys, thank you so much for watching, and I shall see you in the next video. Looking forward to 2023 with all that has to be holded in. So thank you so much. See you in the next video. Catch you guys later.